Now let's pivot to something equally critical: agility in decision making. In our next panel, Decision Making Agility: Pathways for Developing Resilient and Adaptable Decision Makers, we're unpacking the art of swift and effective decision making. Please put your hands together for our moderator, Vipa Chawla, business owner, business and executive coach of Focal Point Business Coaching of Lincolnshire, Illinois, and our esteemed panelists. Let's welcome them to the stage.
I think you're at the end, right? Yeah.
All right.
All right. Good morning, everyone. How is everyone doing? Great? Okay, awesome. So the topic today, as our presenter was saying, is decision-making agility. So what are the pathways for developing adaptable and resilient decision makers? So I think we all know how important decision-making is. And we have the panelists here, so I'm going to just do a quick introduction, but they're going to introduce themselves. So we have Alec Hunt, managing partner with VC Partners here. Gemma Bloss. I'm sorry if I'm pronouncing your name incorrectly. My pronunciation is a little bit bad here. From Reinventor Lab. And we have Michael Baer. He's from Peak Capital Trading. And Nirmalya Banerjee from Wildy. Thank you very much for joining us. And we'll get started with the conversation about decision making. And again, we are talking about agility, adaptability, and resilience, and how important it is for our business owners. So can we raise hands here? How many business owners do we have in the room? Okay, majority of you. Thank you very much. All right, so with this CEO panel, I guess I'm going to get started with you, Alec. If you can introduce yourself and tell us about your company, and also tell us why is decision-making so important for our business and business growth, and even for, I guess, personal life too.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Can you guys hear me? Okay, great. So I'm Alec Hudnut, managing partner at Vici Partners. We're a consulting firm that focuses exclusively on earnings growth and turnaround work for companies. So if you own a business with more than 50 million of revenue and are interested in improving your earnings, please come talk to me after the panel. So most of our work at Vici Partners is on a contingency basis. So we make money when we get our clients profitable or when we improve their overall profitability. And when we're profiling clients, we need to make sure we get it right because we're putting a lot of risk and investment into these companies before we get paid. And one of the factors that we look at as the most important is how decisions are made, because we find that the way in which decisions are made at companies is one of the largest determinants of their overall profitability. So it's not like an optional thing that's kind of interesting, that's a peripheral topic that you can sort of think about occasionally. Mm-hmm. Everything you do at a business, from setting your strategy to figuring out your intellectual property to developing products and brands, what sits behind that is the way in which you make decisions. It's like the skill in the company that influences everything else. Mm-hmm. So we believe at Vici Partners that decision-making is absolutely critical to all of the different aspects of your business. And to put it boldly, it is the most important trait of a company. So if we come into a business and find that they have the wrong type of decision-making culture and they're unlikely to change, we're less likely to want to serve them. So I can talk a little bit more later about the different types of decision-making that work well in companies and the types that don't. But that's a general introduction of our firm and our practice.
So I think what, Alec, you're saying is that decision-making is impacting directly the profitability also, right? We have thousands of decisions that we're making every single day and every single time, from getting up in the morning and to the night, that impacts our business and personal life. Thank you very much, Alec. I think that's very critical. Being a business coach, I can relate to that how does a business decision-making impact quite a lot on revenues and profitability. Thank you, Alec. With that, we're going to go to Gemma. And Gemma, if you can talk about what are the factors that you consider important for decision-making agility, because this is a very fast-paced environment, right? So the speed of the way we make decisions is very critical here, not just the process, but also the speed. And how do you navigate like uncertainty, right? Because there's so much uncertainty in the world, and how do you adapt to those changing environments? Could you explain a little bit more about your company? What do you do, and how does your company help with that?
Sure. So just to jump off of what you were talking about, Alec, just about how decisions are going to be the crux of how you move forward, whether you're profitable, whether you fail, whether you sink, whether you are impactful. But it's humans who are behind those decisions. And so the Reinventor Lab, what we do is we support teams to be able to create the conditions where people are heard, people feel like they can contribute, there is a bond in where they can trust each other to take risks. And so our work starts at the beginning. It starts with building out the human capital to be able to work in teams, make risky but supportive decisions, to be able to take action on things that they may not have taken action on had they been the sole decider on it. And so I liken it to making sure that the humans have the capacity to make the decisions, the effective decisions that will move the company forward. One of the tools that we use is what we call the Titanic syndrome. And it's looking at some of the ways in which the Titanic sank. It wasn't the iceberg that sank the Titanic. It was human error. And there was multiple human error. Not even human error, but also historical dependence on success. Things like that actually happened, and it was to the detriment of the Titanic and the sinking of it. So we're looking at past perspectives, the success, and if those successes even apply anymore, what are we not thinking about? What are the perspectives that we need to be seeing? Who needs to be giving that information, contributing that information? All of these factors are important in decision making, is making sure that those who are part of whatever project is moving forward, or whatever program that you want to implement or product you want to introduce, those people involved in any element of the design, any element of the implementation, need to have some confidence and some value in making any kind of decisions moving forward.
Thank
So
you
that's
very
important,
much.
yeah.
Yeah, that's very important. That's basically diversity, inclusion, very critical for decision making, and I would say also for innovation, right? If you don't have the diverse team, diverse people, it can impact the innovation and decision making. Very good. Thank you very much. Can audience relate to this? Can you raise your hands? Does that make sense?
But it's not just diversity and equity and inclusion. It's more around belonging. It's more around that sense of what I have to contribute is meaningful. What I have, if I want to take on some sort of risk or take on a responsibility, I'm supported. It's not necessarily just yes, absolutely.
Okay.
Diversity and equity.
Thank you for clarifying that.
Very important, but
awesome.
That sense of belonging.
As you can see, I'm not the expert there. Thank you so much. I accept that. All right, so I know the next question was from me, but I think we're going to spice things up with Michael, because I think he is going to tell us something. It's a difficult question. I think I always run into that, and that's why we assigned Michael for that. And the situations that we run into generally is like the hypothetical approach, right? To a decision making, one person or one approach is more focusing on speed and agility, and the other is focusing more on decision making for risk and mitigation. Have you guys run into that situation before? Right? That's quite common. I believe, CM, you can correlate to that. We run into that all the time. As my business partner, we had a conflict in that situation, speed and agility, and I was focusing on risk and mitigation. Michael, could you chime in and explain us what would be more effective here and why? And I'm ready to be wrong here. So,
Absolutely. So just a little bit about me, because my answer is going to kind of fluctuate, right?
Yes.
I'm a retired Sergeant Major, spent 23 years in the Marine Corps. And then I transitioned, and then I transitioned out and got a job as a Chief Learning Officer at a P Capital Trading, which is a trading firm, trading the stock market. So I went completely opposite in my career. And a lot of this evolves around decision making, right? We talk about two approaches. You got the speed, you got the agility, and then you have, well, let's look at risk and let's look at analysis. Both those methodologies are absolutely practical in a situation. But before you can choose which one to use, you need to fully understand the situation that you are dealing with. Because if you apply the wrong methodology to the situation, the outcome can be disastrous. And I like giving extremes, for example. So let's go kinetic operations. Again, I'm a Marine. So imagine you have an individual Marine at a guard post, vehicles coming to them. They have very quick need to make a decision. How am I going to approach this? Am I going to stop the vehicle? How do I stop the vehicle? Do I need to stop the vehicle? All these decisions have to be made split second. You're talking less than a second, maybe 5 seconds if you're on there. So this Marine makes the decision, neutralizes the vehicle. You go out, you search the vehicle, you find explosives. Marine made an excellent decision. How did he or she make that decision? Made it because there were people in executive spots that were able to sit back and instead of applying speed and agility, which that Marine had to, they applied risk and analysis. They took a look and said, this situation may arise. Most likely it's going to arise. How do we ensure that our unit or our organization can be successful when I have to take away the business owner? I see lots of business owners out here. You have to delegate that authority down. How do you ensure that the people below you make the correct decision and apply that? And you do that through training and education. Now let's look at a situation when it wasn't applied correctly. I'm sure everybody's very familiar with the Space Shuttle Challenger accident, not really an accident, but tragedy that occurred. And as they went back and they looked at it, they decided the flight director was applying speed and agility. They needed more flights. They needed flights. They needed to produce results for Congress in order to maintain their budget. However, the flight engineers and safety are telling them this is not a safe condition to take off or make a launch. Extreme cold and pressure and the weather system that was around had a high probability of failure of the O-ring. Flight director did not care. Instead of applying, hey, let's take a step back. Let's take a good, thorough look at this because we do have time. They decided, no, let's do speed and agility. So they applied the wrong methodology to the situation. And unfortunately, as you saw, traumatic things happened from it, which ultimately had a very negative impact on the NASA Space Shuttle program. It was grounded for multiple years until they could rectify the situation. And when they went back, all the signs were there for years that that was the issue. So again, it's not which one is better than the other. They're both great. It's about your ability to assess the situation that you were dealing with and ensuring that you apply the appropriate methodology to it to get the outcome that you want.
Thank you very much. That was very insightful. So it depends on the situation, which one do we apply, whether it's speed and agility or the risk and mitigation. I know we have quite some more time. Are there any questions from the audience? Can you guys relate to it? Have you been into the situation where you had to figure out between speed and agility versus risk and mitigation approach for decision making?
I wonder if I might be able to share sort of, I love that you use
Sure.
the metaphor of the Challenger. I was talking initially about the Titanic and how there was so much human error. So as I mentioned, it was not the iceberg that sank the Titanic. It was human error. There were a few things that are revealed in the report that show evidence of 3 different huge decisions that were made that actually sank the Titanic. The first one being it was focused. There are 2 seamen who are always at every 2 hours. They were always on the crow's nest and being able to look out for where where there might be some danger. They actually couldn't see the actual iceberg because they didn't have binoculars. The reason they didn't have binoculars, and you'd think this would be an obvious thing to have for people on the crow's nest, the reason they didn't have binoculars is because someone in leadership decided, there was one person who actually carried the keys to the cabinet that had the binoculars. A leader decided to have that person get off the ship but forgot to get the keys. But meanwhile, people thought it was an unsinkable ship, so nobody bothered to try and break the cabinet open to get the binoculars. They just thought, we're fine. So that was one human error there. The second one was, and that was leadership, and also the team not feeling comfortable or feeling too confident that nothing dangerous was gonna happen. The second one was where they had a new radio technology. And at that night, there were lots of warning signs. In fact, many warning signals, and some of those signals were supposed to go directly to the captain, but the captain never received it. And why? Because the radio technology was brand new, and people were using it to send messages to home, saying, "Oh, please make sure the flowers are ready when I get home." Like really mundane things. And when the people who were receiving the signals were trying to get through to the captain, the people who were helping the first class passengers try and send those messages decided that that was more important. And they yelled at the people trying to give the warnings. And so what was the flaw there? Focusing solely on customer service. They had excellent customer service, but look at what happened to them. And then the final one was there was the first mate the assistant to the captain was, since the captain was asleep, he was in charge. And he was known historically as this person who was able to avoid a huge collision. There were 2, his ship and another ship were coming really close, and they managed to avoid each other by 2 inches. So he was famous for making that decision. He was famous for knowing how to handle situations like that. And what they found out was that had he just had the Titanic go right directly into the iceberg, it would not have sunk. Certainly, it would have had major damage, but it would not have sunk. So even then, relying on past successes is another reason why these failed. So there are so many things that are counterintuitive to how we make decisions, thinking that we're going to count on our history and best practices, we're going to count on our leadership, we're going to count on the confidence that our company's never going to fail. These are all ways in which these kinds of company Titanics will sink.
Yeah, thank you, Gemma. Is there a question there? Or?
Thank you. Good morning, Chetty Matthews. Quick question for you. Whether you have an agile organization or one that's very zero defect, once a decision maker, leader, business owner makes a mistake, or someone in that organization makes a mistake, what would you recommend for success in recovering, so going forward you still have the agility in that organization, or the growth trajectory, or things don't change based on the fact that you had an accident or a mishap in the past, based on a decision that you probably delegated to someone that was lower in the chain? That's for anybody.
You want to take it?
Yeah.
Anybody else want to take that?
I can take it. I'm really good for answering this, right? Delegation, right? You can delegate accountability or tasks, but you can't delegate the responsibility. And I think that's the first aspect that a leader needs to understand, is that if you gave a task to somebody that's below, that doesn't mean they're responsible for it. You're still responsible for it. So if they make a mistake or cause a mishap or something occurs that is detrimental to the company, you can't go directly at them and try to make it their fault. It's also your fault. So counseling them and bringing them in, obviously the first thing you have to do is assess the situation and say, what do we need to do to mitigate damages, isolate the problem, make sure that this doesn't continue. I think Boeing's having that issue right now, along with even United's having a major issue with that right now, is that they're having to isolate and go through it. Then what you do is you then go back and you directly engage with that employee and find out what their thought process was. Why did they make that decision? What was the reason that you did that? Why did you not come to me if you were unsure of something? And you turn it into a learning experience, because that individual is going to have more respect in it and learn more from that situation with that type of approach versus I'm going to just put a hammer down on you. I'm going to reprimand you. Don't do that again. This is all your fault. If you take it very personal, and then you're just in fear, and that isn't how you grow in an organization. And it also, what that does is it shows everybody else in the rest of the organization, I can make mistakes, and people aren't afraid to start and come to the leadership and ask, hey, I don't know what this is. I want to know how to do this. Show me. And it encourages empowerment.
Yeah.
And when you have empowerment in your organization, it's going to thrive. If you try to micromanage the organization, it's going to destroy it internally.
Right. I would agree with that too. I think effective delegation is not just giving the work to someone, but also trusting and verifying, right? Give a checkpoint at some point saying that, okay, what's going on? Do you need any help? Verification is very critical in terms of effective delegation. We can take one more question. Yes, go ahead.
Hi, good morning.
Good morning.
Afternoon, I think. I'm the Chief Human Resources Officer for a government agency in New York, and oftentimes I find that leaders are afraid to make decisions, and sometimes it's because of accountability. A lot of times they don't want to be accountable. How do you bridge that gap and create the culture of failure when you have speed and results, which can be opposing balance?
Yeah, culture of failure.
Let
You want to speak?
me address. That's a good question.
Yeah, great.
I think, so let me give an example of one of the very good decision-making cultures. So Disney, when they're building new theme parks, they bring in their reimagineering people, who are mostly cultural anthropologists, and that reimagineering person comes up with a single word or two words that guide everybody's decisions on that project. Mm-hmm. So they were building a new hotel in Hawaii, and the word they came up with was green. So if you're making a decision between the can of paint that's $14 but off gases, and the can of paint that's $21 that's natural and doesn't off gas and is better for the environment, green is your guiding principle. choose the $21 can of paint. Or if you're thinking of paving in the rainforest next to the hotel versus building parking under the hotel, well, don't pave over the rainforest. Green. So what we focus on is the leader's obligation is to set that framework for the company and then allow people under the framework to make the specific decisions. If the leader's not setting the framework, then you need a new leader, or you need to coach that leader to do that. But it's okay under that framework if people make mistakes sometimes, right? So long as they're not outside of the framework. But if they just make a mistake and they don't paint the wall correctly, but they chose the right can of paint, well, then they have an execution issue and they need to go back and repaint the wall. But the leader's principal obligation is to set the framework for decision-making. So the best decision-making cultures that we see at Vici Partners and our clients are executives who are willing to drive the overall framework for how the company makes decisions and then empower the individuals to go ahead and make decisions within that framework. So it's not really about agility. It's not about agility. It's about the overall framework and the buy-in of the organization to the framework, which then allows the agile decision-making underneath. Right? The guy buying the can of paint can himself make the decision in 30 seconds about which can to buy because he has that overall framework of green. So the overall framework allows agile decision-making that support the prime directive of the company on that particular project.
So adding to that also is that you mentioned about the culture of failure, right? One thing I have observed in biotech companies is also that when the leaders fail, we need to definitely have a framework for sure. I think that's a great point. Under that framework, when the people are failing, demonstrate that, hey, we failed, but we learned something out of it. So that is very critical for agility, right? We are embracing uncertainty. It is okay to be in an uncertain environment. It's okay to be in an uncertain situation. It's okay to fail as long as you're in the framework, but that also fosters that culture of embracing that uncertainty, allowing for mistake, actually showcasing that failure, and embracing that culture of innovation. So that is very, very critical. I think it was very surprising and actually inspiring. We saw leaders showcasing, hey, I failed, here's what I learned, but here's the decision framework, this is the time frame, and we're moving on. So does that make sense? Yeah, thank you very much. That was a great question. So moving on.
May I also address the two?
We are running into time.
Okay.
You want to say for a few seconds? Go ahead. Sorry.
Yes.
I'm trying to manage the time here too. Thank you,
I
Gemma.
can address both of those. So ours is a little unconventional because we start with culture building first, and then that culture will build the framework together. But the unorthodox element to it is that we start with imposter syndrome. It's such a weird way to start, but it's where a lot of people feel insecurities around making decisions. It affects how they produce. It affects how they show up. It affects how they decide. And so when we can get a sense of those insecurities of imposter syndrome that people are having, because I work mostly with female teams, where that is, then we are getting a sense of where those, what is holding them back to feeling like they can step into their leadership, where they can step into, taking risks, because that will in turn help them by establishing those sort of, identifying those issues that everyone might be having and establishing all of these great rituals or policies or practices that will encourage it throughout the process. It changes the relationship to mistakes. It changes the relationship to failure. It changes the relationship to sole responsibility, to team responsibility. So I spend a whole day with these teams first just to be able to establish where those insecurities are, because we need to know where they are so that we can support each other.
Thank you very much, Gemma and Alec, for answering this question. It was a difficult question, by the way. Thank you so much. So the next, I'm going to move on to the real world case study, and then we'll come back to Nirmalia. Thank you very much. So the question from me was about the real world case study, where a company is facing a major strategic challenge, and how would I approach that situation considering the principles of decision-making agility. So I will introduce myself too. My name is Vibha Chawla, and I'm with Focal Point. Have you guys heard of Brian Tracy? Okay, all right. So he has 4 million plus program graduates, and we basically help companies with increasing revenues. As Alec was talking about the profitability, I completely agree with decision making. Overall, I would say that the decision making is very, very critical, right? When we are doing the business coaching also in terms of business growth and revenues and profitability, the right decision at the right time is the right thing, and right decision at the wrong time is wrong. So we need to move very quickly in terms of business growth. How many of you are trying to actually grow your business? How many of you are trying to increase your revenues? Oh, quite a lot of you. Oh, please do talk to me. I am very passionate about growing revenues. So the example that I was going to give here is that one of my business owner, he came to me, he wanted to have or I guess he was in a situation where we had to increase his revenues by 400% very, very quickly, right? There were a lot of things going on in his business. I think Focal Point had about, 270 plus strategies, figuring out. That's where the decision-making framework comes into picture, right? How do we figure out of those 270 strategies, which ones are going to work for this business owner who needs a 400% increment in revenue? Very challenging task, and I'm thinking in my mind, this is quite impossible to do. And we ended up doing his assessment. We have a 3 to 5 minutes online assessment for all the business owners, whoever is interested. It takes 3 to 5 minutes, and you can come up with 3 to 6 action plans. So overall, we had to strategize, figure out which decisions will have the majority impact and highest probability of success. We came up with 3 to 6 action items that will help him with increment in the revenues. Do you know what those 3 action items could be? Can anybody guess? Would they have to set the goals? Could you raise your hands? Do they need to set the goals? Sometimes people ask me that question too. Goal setting is important, yes. Do you set it monthly, yearly, daily, weekly? What do you do? Daily, please. Write down daily. Write down the yearly goals, but write down daily. Very critical. Number 2 is the networking strategy, okay? We don't go everywhere. He was going everywhere. No, we don't go everywhere. We just go where their clients were. So that's what had to happen because we had to make sure he is successful. Number 3, what's the number 3? What do you need to do to increase your revenues? Marketing. You're going to say that, Sam. He's a marketing guy. He has to say that. No, we did not work on the marketing, for God's sake. Anybody else? What do you need to do to increase your revenues? Find more leads is also related to marketing. No, we had to work on his selling strategy. Most importantly, we figured out, if you don't know what the 7 buying signals are, let me know. There are 7 buying signals from customers. If you see them, you need to approach them right away because that's when you can make your increment in the revenue. So those were the 3 things. He had to change his style. Adaptability and agility came into the picture because he had to change his communication style to match with others so the others will listen to them. Because if others are not listening and if they're not making a decision, if they're not emotionally involved with him, they were not going to buy from him. That was pretty clear to me, and it was pretty clear to him. He did make a change. He was successful. We had a 400% increment in revenue. That was the success for decision-making agility and the framework. We had a framework that we are going to make it in certain time frame, but the agility was definitely required there. We could not follow 100 strategies. We could not follow 10 strategies. We had to have only 3 strategies that he could work on. So be sane, be with family, have some time off, go on vacation. He did go on vacation, by the way, to Thailand. I haven't gone yet, but regardless. Anyways, can anybody relate to this? Did anybody have any increment or want to have such type of revenue increment? Nobody wants to have 400% increment in revenue? All of you guys want to have it. I can see that. All right, thank you very much. That was my decision-making agility real example. I loved it. I think it was a lot of fun for us. And with this, I'm going to go to Nirmalia. Nirmalia, if you can talk about some advice for enhancing everybody's decision-making agility, adaptability skills.
Sure. So I'll first introduce myself and relate it to the work that we do, and from there I'll elaborate on the decision-making agility and how we do this. So I'm Nirmalia Banerjee. I am the CEO and founder of Wildy. Wildy is a management consulting and advisory firm. We focus on innovation and innovative management framework. So decision making and agility in decision making comes to picture in as we have already discussed, it comes to every place and every person in business. So everyone needs to be conscious and conscious about what kind of decision they are responsible to make, and they take the pathway to make those decisions. So decision making actually varies into two different categories. As business decision makers or everyday decision makers take care of their life and their everyday goals. First category is that we have two network in our brains. One is for daily activities or routine activities, and another is for exploration and innovation. So when we decide something, we first try to understand what the decision making is all about, what is the ask, and accordingly we decide the ask to into a decision. So to do that, we explore the world, and we explore the opportunities and the options that needs to be explored to understand what decision needs to be made. So that brain's exploration network comes into the picture. And when the brain's everyday routine network comes into the picture, we become agile and quickly decide depending on our previous experience and expertise. So we can be very agile to decide on things which we have experience about, or which we have previously experienced or participated in similar kind of things. So these two areas needs to be balanced when we are deciding, and we need to go data driven to do our exploration. So data driven decision making is also organizations needs to follow to understand their exploration mechanism. Now when the decision makers are actively organizing or actively acting in an organization, there can be two types of decision makers. One is democratic and another is dictators. So we need to understand the organizational culture that to promote democratic decision making, so that people can participate in decision making along with their supervisors or peers. So along with that, we have biases in decision making. We need to address biases before we decide something. We need to be conscious about our biases, so that if it is a data bias, if it is a analytics bias, or if it is a knowledge-based bias, we need to understand those, and we can eliminate those biases before we decide on something for the organization. So these are the main points I would recommend for organizational decision makers to address when they are addressing their decision making for their organization and as well as for their day-to-day activities.
Yeah, thank you very much, Nirmalia. That's very insightful as well. About removing biases kind of aligns with what Gemma was saying, but more yours is more analytics. So this is very helpful. Before we close the discussion here, are there any other questions from the audience? Go ahead, Siam. He's a funny man, of course.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Siam Pasarlai. It is S-I-A-M, Siam. I'm personal branding strategist. I help people to grow them fast and with the social media, with your career, or in your business life. I see people spend a lot of money going to the conferences, on their education, on their business, but they don't spend money on their personal branding. So I always ask this question, what if I hear your name, what should come to my mind? So this is the question everybody should answer. And then when I want to work with them, so they have one problem. That problem is they cannot make decision all the time. They have fear. So now my question is here, how to remove this fear when we are making decision? And what are the consequences of making a decision if the decision is wrong, or even though for me it is personal branding, it is positive, but they have this fear. What if people see me on Facebook, on like TikTok, on YouTube, or if I become famous, how should I handle it? But there are lots of fear. So I need this help, answer, how to remove this fear to get more clients. Thank you.
Thank you, Siam. Anybody else? I have my own opinion, but anybody else wants to chime in?
So I could take this. It's a good one. So at Peak Capital Trading, what we do, we help and assist individuals that want to get involved in the stock market and transition from whatever their career is to working their own business. Well, in order to do that, you have to learn to be wrong. If you ever want to trade the stock market, remember that. You have to be wrong. Think about a baseball player. A great hitter is 300. That means they failed 7 out of 10 times, and they're considered great. That kind of goes into what you're saying, is what we try to do is to get individuals to quit thinking about what they can control. We as individuals are outcome oriented. We want to control every outcome. We want to make sure everybody's happy. We want to know what we're eating. We want to make sure we get to wherever we're going on time, and you do things. In the market, and also when you're trying to brand yourself on social media, you have zero control over what's going to happen. Zero. You have none. The market's going to go up or it's going to go down. You may think it's going to go up, and everything tells you it is, except Warren Buffett decides that he needs to sell everything today, which means it's going down. And you're wrong. You got to learn to live with that. And same on social media. You can post and be doing everything right, and then one person seasons like, you're a threat to my business and my organization, so now I'm going to try to come out and just target you. You have to be able to understand that, focus on the process of what you're trying to get to, and that's going to deter and eliminate some of that fear that you have of failing, right? It's like, okay, yeah, that happened, big deal. On to the next thing, let's go. On to the next thing, on to the next thing, so.
Gemma, you want to add something?
Yeah, I just want to add one thing. So I would argue, I would challenge and invite this audience to stop thinking of everything as a decision and think about it as an experiment. Because when you think about it as an experiment, you are allowing yourself data to come in to inform what your next step is.
Absolutely.
So this is not about decisions, because when you do make a decision, you feel paralysis because you're like, what if it's wrong? What if it's not? When scientists do experiments, they invite being wrong. They invite being right. They invite any information that's new that's going to help them find what it is they're looking for. So I think that's my biggest this is what I'd like to offer everyone. Stop thinking of them as decisions and think of them as experiments. You'll be able to free yourself up of any of that paralysis and any of that fear of failing.
Yeah. I just want to add one single word here, is that motivation. Motivate them to what they want to achieve. Instead of thinking about the fear, motivate them to what they want to achieve. So I think, do you have one more question? How much time do we have? Do we know? I have no idea. So go ahead, please.
I got the opportunity.
I was trying to manage the time here, but apparently I don't need to.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
So thank you so much.
Sure.
So, see, I think it's all about taking decisions. And my name is Anshav Jain and I'm from India. We are building a $1 billion fund to fund the next 100 unicorns of India without any risk. The question for me is that when it comes to investment decisions, especially into startups, it's a very risky proposition, even though it's a very high, reward opportunity as well. And what I would want to understand is that when it comes to taking critical decisions in terms of investing in the startups, which are early stage companies, what is that an investor or let's say a venture capitalist should kind of take care of while investing in these early startups? So what is the decision-making capabilities they should have, that whether they should go for it or they should not go for it? Because internally they might be thinking it's too risky, but this could be a potential big opportunity, which could give, probably Peter Thiel got $1.1 billion with just $500,000 investment in just 8 years of time. So want to know about that.
Yeah, I think given the time frame, I'm going to add something here, but you may want to talk to Alec about the decision-making framework offline. I'm going to say that for me, the startups that come to us is we do proof of concept for them to make sure that they can be successful in the long run. So there is a small proof of concept. It's also called the OOCH thing. I don't know if that's something you have considered or not in terms of your decision making. You do a proof of concept for 3 months to see if it's successful, and then based on that, you fund it or not in future. That make sense?
Yeah, I think, yeah.
What we've seen work in venture is basically two strategies. One strategy is focus on a few industries and focus on a stable of founders that you've worked with before and trust, right? That's what most of the early stage venture funds do. Another approach is to not decide, to invest in everything. Yeah. That's the first round capital approach. And that also works because you're basically saying, of the 1,000 companies that get started this year that come to my door, I really don't know who's going to make it. So I'm going to listen for 30 minutes to each of them. And if it sounds reasonably interesting, I'm going to invest. And so they're not trying to decide. They're basically investing in almost the entire market and knowing that 10% of it will do well. So either focus on the industries or focus on a stable of founders that you really know. And you can afford to do that if you're a more mature VC, or if you're just starting out in your early stage. It's like playing roulette. Play more numbers, right? Mm-hmm. Don't just play the red and the black. Play more numbers. And that has worked really well for some early stage venture funds as well.
Absolutely. Anything else somebody wants to share? Otherwise, yeah. Please.
Well, I'm always going to go back to the human aspect, right? Anyone can have a great idea. There's going to be everyone has thought they've got some world-changing idea. What you want to see. So I coach and I also judge $1 million investment competitions for startups around the globe, disruptive ones. And what we're looking for always is to look at the dynamics of the team. Do they have the skill sets within their circle, whether it be in the founding team, whether it be in the their advisors, whether it be with their partners. What does that look like? Because that is going to be a better indicator. Well, for me at least, that is an indicator for me to see that this company could succeed because of the relationships, the dynamics, the ability to share decisions, take calculated but supported risks. that kind of thing, because essentially you're investing in people, right? You're investing in the people to,
Human element is critical.
Yeah.
for sure.
Does that answer your question?
Yeah,
To
actually,
some extent. If it doesn't, I guess we can do one-on-one
Take
with
it
you.
up offline.
Offline,
We do
yeah,
have
because your
these
question is a little bit more
parameters,
complicated.
Separately considered, and I really liked your idea of revenue, realization, because
Sure.
unless the founder's focus is on revenue increase, there's no point of building up
Right.
a company.
Yeah, we can talk offline.
Thank you so much.
Between the three of us with you. Yeah, welcome to. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Panel, that's all the time we have.
Okay.
Thank you so much. We have an awards recognition session
So I'm
that
just
we're
going
a
to
little
close
bit
it
late
out.
for
All
next.
right.
Can I just close it out here by thank you very much, my panelists, for this insightful discussion. It wouldn't be as wonderful if I did it on my own. So really appreciate it. I think all the great ideas. I just met them 1 month ago, so it's amazing connecting with them. And thank you very much to the audience. Really appreciate. Would love to do one-on-one with anybody who's interested in increasing revenues, or please reach out to the panelists as well. So I just want to summarize this in a nutshell here. Basically 3 things that we have learned here. Embrace uncertainty, have a decision framework, learn from failure, and foster a culture of innovation. Thank you very much again. Thanks a lot for attending. Thank you. Did awesome.